At first, it seems really intimidating, almost kind of out of date at the same time when you compare it to others, but it's really not as bad as it seems. Hey, what's up guys? Sunny here, and it's time for another talking point. I feel like I'm gonna lose my voice. I've done so much talking these past few days, and it's early morning. So I have a bit of experience working with different workstations, but considering the circumstances, I always find that I'm coming back to Pro Tools. Don't get me wrong, I still prefer Ableton, and it's a phenomenal workstation. I would use it like 9 times out of 10. It's just that I'm usually in that 10th of a percentile situation. I need to be able to walk in at the same time you do, open up my laptop, and we have a session like that. Which means the number one most important thing is workflow. I can tell you this now, that if you were to work with someone, doesn't matter what field, but if it takes them 20 minutes to an hour to get organized and set up, you'd probably be gone. At least I would. So get organized. When it comes to a Pro Tools session, I typically start off setting up my Aggregate. Probably the most powerful tools that I use to set up my sessions, honestly. Aggregates are genuinely amazing. Basically, an aggregate is a whole single device that basically what an aggregate does, or what an aggregate is a whole single device that constitutes disparate elements. This basically allows you to set your playback engine as one device, as you would, but you have complete control over all your ins and outs across various different devices connected to your computer. So I can route external buses and have it communicate to one external device or outboard gear, and then set up another external bus and send that to a completely different and separate device that is also connected to the computer. It's a huge time saver, especially if you have a really complex routing matrix, but the keyword here is routing. Routing plays a huge factor into all of this, and it gets a little bit confusing just because it is digital, so you really have to get the basics of routing down. But the good thing is that an aggregate is universal. So it doesn't matter what software you're using, whether it's Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, Propeller Heads, Reason, I don't know what else, Studio One. It doesn't really matter. As long as you know your routing, you're solid. Once that's set, this is where the templates come in handy. It's real quick to make one, and even if you need to add more tracks, shortcuts. I'm gonna put them right here. Right here. Pause the video if you need to. Memorize that. Okay? Okay. I have a handful of different templates, mostly because I work with different groups of people and I have different setups, so it's just easier. I just come in. Things don't really change all that much. They kind of do occasionally, but not really. So it's just set up, done, got the template, I can set up a new session. But the basics goes as the following from top down the track list. You got instruments, vocals, group buses, effects, submix, and master. That basically sums up my core tracks. Sometimes I set up a Q mix, but that's really kind of rare since I can create a whole separate queue on a different device. That way it's one less thing for my computer to compute, but it does come in handy when you have that one person that's like really touchy, wants to get hands on in their mix, and like you don't want them to touch it, so you're like, all right, that's your track, that's your fader, play with that, A lot of the time, I'm probably tracking about 12, 20 tracks direct in the Pro Tools. The most I've ever done is 48. Actually, I remember talking to someone who was recording direct into Pro Tools backstage during a show. They told me you're better off recording onto an external hard drive rather than having it right into an internal hard drive when it comes to Pro Tools. I have yet to give that theory a test, but it's something to consider if you're tracking that many inputs for an extended period of time. I probably rack up anywhere between 5 to 8 gigs of raw audio file in a given session. It's nuts. Everything else is kind of basic. It kind of depends on what you have and or what you use. So like reverbs, I do plates, and then however you want to EQ it, gate stuff, compression, and then like post, fader, pre-fader, all that type of stuff. That's really up to you and how you do your thing and what kind of sound you're trying to achieve. But on the real, it doesn't really matter what workstation you use. Ultimately, you can always achieve the same result. You just have to understand the software. I just think Pro Tools is better for my use case because I have it optimized for what I do. But that's gonna do it for today's video. Real quick and short, simple tips and tricks on how I use Pro Tools. If you guys like this video, leave a like and consider subscribing. But that's my word. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.